What I'd like to talk to you today about a little bit is some of the problems that I see when I travel around the country doing roping clinics and to different rodeos and ropings. It seems like there's people have a lot of different ideas about the way their horse ought to be saddled, the way their horse ought to be padded, and I'm going to give you some ideas on the way I think that it will help you. So right now what I'd like to do is introduce you to the OrthoFlex system. And you can see how this saddle will give a horse's shoulders room on either side independently. Horse's back can get shorter on either side. And it makes a nice round surface around that tree. Now that's something too, that this is a rigid tree. This is a regular tree, but there's a suspension system between the tree and the skirts, where the conventional saddle would be screwed to the skirts would be screwed to the tree right there. You can see the suspension system under and how it can work. And you can see here that each skirt is independent and allow that horse's back to move any way he needs to move. Plus, if you have a real narrow-backed horse, it'll get narrow. If you have a real round-backed horse, it'll get more round. So you have a lot more flexibility here, like we said, to fit more types of horses. What makes this system different is the space between the skirt and the tree. In your conventional saddle, your skirt is attached to your tree. This has a suspension system that holds it away from the tree and allows the horse's back to move. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about this horse's back again, and then about the pad. Now remember, this horse has a hollow behind his shoulder. Okay, when we put the OrthoFlex system on him, the system is going to fill this in. It's going to fill this in, but as it does, it's going to come out more here and use up a lot of its flex. And so we have an option here. Put the pad on, and then that's what this pocket here is for, is to put as many balance shims as we need here to fill in that hollow behind his shoulder. Okay? You have to be real careful and experiment with your individual horse, but this is how you can custom fit each horse. Is this horse, I would probably ride with 2 shims. Open it up, fill in the hollow behind his shoulder, or maybe even on this horse you could ride him with 3, but you can see the option to be able to custom fit however many you need to fill in the hollow behind his shoulder. And like I said, the system will do it, but this will allow to fill it in to where the system even has more room to work front and back. Now one thing that I want to caution you about here with your balance shims, and I think logic would tell you here, you want to be real careful wherever your horse's shoulder is at. If you end up with your balance shims on top of that shoulder, you're in worse shape than you were before you started, because now it's like you have a rock underneath or even more buildup on top of the shoulder. You want to make sure that this is behind the shoulder wherever you need, and each time you saddle your horse, you want to make sure that these are adjusted right and that you have the right shims in for the right horse. Okay, when we saddle with the system, the OrthoFlex system, we want to make sure we got the bottom pad pulled up in the gullet, just like with our conventional saddle. That lets the panels get down around the horse's back, and this will settle a little bit as you ride, but you want to start off with it up there as high as you can get it. Okay, and then when you push your saddle on, you want to make sure that the front of the panel is just over the shoulder. And if you have balance shims in, you want to make sure that your balance shims are where you want them. If you have to adjust it, take it off, make sure you got them right. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is the rigging that goes with this system. They call it drop yoke rigging. You notice that the pull comes from lower down on the horse, better at keeping the saddle in place, and it pulls from the front and the back and pulls everything towards the sternum. One thing about this saddle, when you have it cinched and it's right, you're not going to be able to get on it and stand in a stirrup and straighten it out. That's one of the things I like. The panels really suck into the side of the horse's back. They'll move with it, but they won't allow the saddle to turn. Another thing is when you're cinching your horse, I have found that it's a little different than cinching my conventional saddle. I want to pull this cinch out away from him as I cinch him. And as I warm my horse up and before I compete, I'll pull him an extra hole than what I normally would on a conventional saddle, because as my weight gets in the saddle and everything sinks, it actually loosens the cinch a little bit. So you want to have your cinch pulled a little bit tighter than you might think that you would want it, but when you get in it, it'll loosen it. And as soon as you step out, it'll tighten up a little bit, so when you're not riding your horse, you want to make sure you have him uncinched. Now you can see how we have room here between the tree and the skirt, and you see how the skirt is allowed to move here, all right? Well, I want to show you even more as this horse's shoulder comes up. Now watch how he has the room now, and watch this move as his shoulder comes up. As I lift his shoulder up, do you see how the space gets narrower, then wider? Do you see how it lets the horse's back move? And remember, right before you're ready to compete, you want to girth your horse again. Make sure that it's tight, because when your weight gets in the saddle, it's going to loosen the cinch. Everything is going to settle, and you're going to actually put more slack in the cinch. You want to make sure that you've pulled it up one more time to make sure that this saddle's not going to move. Another thing is when you first start to cinch your saddle, you should start off with it a little bit on the right-hand side, because as you cinch it, it's going to center where you want it. Like I said earlier, this is one saddle that once you have it on, you're not going to be able to get in one stirrup or the other to straighten it out. It needs to be centered and straightened when you get on it. Then when you get off, it's going to tighten back up, so you want to make sure when you're done that you do uncinch. And if you're considering buying a system, I'd like to have you do what I did and let your horse tell you whether it's the right thing for you or not. Good shot.